A single Patriot interceptor costs about $4 million. The drone it just shot down cost around $50,000. That trade happens over Ukrainian cities most nights of the week, and it means the defender loses $80 for every dollar the attacker spent. Win every engagement and still go broke doing it. But in 2024, a small team of Ukrainian engineers asked a different question. Not how to build a better missile, but how to build something priced like the threat it's stopping. Their answer costs roughly $2,000, flies faster than the drones it hunts, and it's already rewriting the economics of this war. In September 2025, Russia launched 810 Shahed and Iran drones at Ukraine in a single night. That's the largest one-night drone assault recorded in this war. By 2026, the daily average had settled at around 144 launches a day. Not a spike, but a baseline. Each Shahed-136 cruises at roughly 180 kilometers per hour, low enough to duck under a lot of radar coverage, carrying a warhead of 40 to 50 kilograms. Patriot systems can knock these down. NASAMS can too, so can Western-supplied gun systems. The problem was never whether Ukraine could hit a Shahed. It was whether Ukraine could afford to. A Patriot battery carries a limited number of interceptors, each one built for tracking ballistic missiles and fighter jets, not drones that cruise at 100 miles an hour. Burn through that stock on Shaheds, and there's nothing left when an actual missile comes in behind the swarm. So Ukraine leaned on cheaper tools. Mobile fire groups with heavy machine guns mounted on pickup trucks, effective at close range but blind at night without help and useless against a drone flying above small arms altitude. That left a gap. Too cheap and too numerous for missile defense. Too fast and too high for a truck-mounted gun crew working off sound and guesswork. Russia built its entire strategy around living inside that gap. Russia widened that gap further with a second drone called Gerbera, built at the same Alabuga plant, roughly $10,000 each, plywood frame, foam skin, often carrying no warhead at all. Its only job is to look like a Shahed on radar. Mix a few dozen Gerberas into a raid, and Ukrainian crews have to treat every blip as a threat, because there's no way to tell a $10,000 decoy from a $50,000 warhead until it's already close. Open source analysts estimate that in some months, decoys made up somewhere between 40 and 60% of a given raid. That's not a side effect, that's the strategy. Deplete the expensive interceptors on cheap fakes, and let the real weapons through behind them. The design itself came from Iran. In 2022, Tehran and Moscow signed an agreement to build the drones on Russian soil, and Russia set up a production plant in Tatarstan using Iranian blueprints for what it now calls the Garan 2. In 2023, internal planning documents from that Alabuga plant put the cost of each drone at around $193,000 a unit. Most of that price was foreign parts and licensing fees paid back to Iran. Then Russia localized production, building its own engines and electronics, and simplifying the airframe down to foam, plywood, and basic composite instead of anything exotic. By 2026, independent estimates from CSIS and RUSI put the real unit cost between $40,000 and $50,000, roughly a quarter of where it started. Volume did the rest. Alabuga's output climbed from around 170 drones a day in 2025 to over 400 a day by January 2026, according to Ukraine's own commander-in-chief. Russia has stated a goal of reaching 1,000 a day. The remaining foreign parts, mainly microelectronics, still arrive through third countries despite sanctions meant to block them. Designed from Iran, manufacturing scale from Russia, and components routed around export controls. That combination is what makes $50,000 possible. This is the same math that built cheap consumer electronics. Simplify the design, source domestically, scale the line, and the unit cost keeps falling even as the weapon stays lethal. So Russia didn't need a better drone. It needed a cheaper one it could throw in numbers large enough that some fraction would always get through, and cheap enough that losing most of them in the attempt barely registered on the balance sheet. Ukrainian drone manufacturer Wild Hornets took the opposite approach. Instead of matching Russia's mass production with more expensive interceptors, they built something almost as disposable as the Shahed itself. They called it Sting. It entered service in 2024, and it's built to do one thing: find a Shahed in the dark and ram it out of the sky. Public pricing on Sting runs between $2,000 and $2,500, depending on the batch and the electronics fitted. For this comparison, we'll use $2,000. When Sting first appeared in late 2024, it topped out around 160 kilometers per hour, barely faster than its target. By August 2025, Wild Hornets had pushed a version to a demonstrated 315 kilometers per hour, close to twice the Shahed's cruise speed. It carries an AI-assisted targeting system that can pick up an air target from roughly 2 kilometers out, then close the gap and detonate on contact. No catapult, no runway. Launch from any flat patch of ground, airborne inside about 15 minutes of setup. Pilots train for about 6 days before they're combat ready, a fraction of the time it takes to certify someone on a Western air defense system. Frontline units report hit rates between 80 and 90%. However, the number that matters more than the hit rate is the price tag next to it. $2,000 to stop $50,000 of incoming ordnance flips the entire trade from a loss into a profit. The airframe borrows heavily from commercial FPV racing parts. A small motor, a lightweight frame, an off-the-shelf flight controller, and a modest explosive charge built to detonate on impact rather than with a proximity fuse. None of it is exotic. That's the point. Wild Hornets has since scaled production into the thousands of units, and Sting is now one of several interceptor models Ukraine fields alongside similar designs from other manufacturers. Different names, same premise. Match the cost of the interceptor to the cost of the target. A fast, cheap interceptor is only useful if someone can tell it where to go. That's the job of a system called Sky Fortress. It's a network of more than 10,000 acoustic sensors built from simple microphones and repurposed smartphones, each one costing somewhere between $400 and $1,000 to deploy. Every sensor listens for the specific engine signature of a Shahed or a cruise missile, then feeds that audio through the mobile network to an AI system that triangulates the drone's position and flight path. That network now covers about 80% of the country and detects incoming Shahed-type threats at a reported rate of 99.6%. The detection data flows straight to tablets in the field, the same ones mobile fire groups and interceptor pilots use to see threat position and heading in near real time. So the loop looks like this. A sensor hears the engine, the network places it on the map. A Sting pilot 15 minutes away gets a heading before the Shahed is anywhere close to its target. That entire sequence, from first detection to a pilot lifting off toward an intercept point, can happen in minutes rather than the longer decision chain a missile battery needs to get clearance to fire. It also means the decision to engage doesn't have to sit with a handful of expensive centralized batteries anymore. It's distributed across dozens of small teams, each one cheap enough to lose and cheap enough to replace. Cheap sensors feeding cheap interceptors. Neither piece is expensive on its own. Together, they replaced a defense architecture that used to depend on missile systems built for an entirely different kind of war. Russia noticed the shift. Its answer is a jet-powered variant, the Geran 3, built around Iran's Shahed-136 design and fitted with a small turbojet engine. Where a standard Shahed cruises at 180 kilometers per hour, the Geran 3 flies at 550 to 600 kilometers per hour, fast enough to show up on radar looking more like a cruise missile than a slow-moving decoy. Russia barely used the type in 2025, roughly 180 launches across the entire year. In the first months of 2026 alone, that number hit 1,400. And Russia isn't retiring the slow, cheap Shaheds or the $10,000 Gerbera decoys to make room for the jet-powered version. It's stacking all three into the same raid. Slow drones and decoys to burn through interceptor stock, fast drones to punch through whatever's left. Ukraine's response has been the same playbook, applied faster. Wild Hornets and other manufacturers are already fielding higher-speed interceptor variants built specifically to run down the jet-powered threat, according to Ukrainian officials. And Ukraine isn't just improving the drone, it's scaling it. Officials have stated production capacity of up to 2,000 interceptor drones a day, with output in early 2026 already doubling everything built in all of 2025. This is still an arms race. But it's now an arms race being fought at drone prices on both sides, instead of missile prices on one side and drone prices on the other. That's the part that actually changes who can sustain this fight. Go back to the opening trade. A $4 million Patriot interceptor against a $50,000 Shahed is an 80-to-1 loss every single time it fires. A $2,000 Sting against that same $50,000 Shahed is roughly a 25-to-1 gain in the defender's favor. The target hasn't changed and neither has the threat, but the outcome is completely different because the tool built to stop it was priced for the war that's actually being fought. Nobody wins a drone war by having the more expensive weapon. Ukraine didn't outproduce Russia's factories, and it didn't outspend the Kremlin's defense budget. It just stopped trying to fight $50,000 drones with $4 million missiles. That's the actual metric worth watching in this war, not territory and not headlines, but the cost-exchange ratio. Whichever side can't bring its price per kill down to match the threat it's facing will eventually run out of money to keep fighting no matter what happens on the ground. Russia is already adapting with faster jet-powered drones. Ukraine is already answering with faster interceptors and more of them. Whoever loses the next round of that exchange isn't losing a battle. They're losing the ability to afford the war at all. That's also why the Pentagon has started asking Ukrainian manufacturers how to buy interceptors like this one for American units. When the country with the $4 million missile starts shopping for the $2,000 drone, that tells you which side of the cost curve actually wins wars. Subscribe if you want to see which other cheap countermeasures NATO is now quietly buying from Ukraine. That breakdown is coming soon.